Get your ears wrapped around the Golden State Media Concepts Basketball Podcast. All the scoop you need to know from college basketball to the NBA and even March Madness. News of your rising stars. Topics on and off the hardwood. This is the Golden State Media Concepts Basketball Podcast.
What's going on, guys? You're listening to the GSMC Basketball Podcast. I'm your host, Casey Foreman, and I got a great one for you guys today. With it getting closer and closer to the return of the NBA, I feel like we're getting more and more news almost each day even. So I'm super excited to share, what news I have for you today. So let's go ahead and break down what today's episode is going to look like. So first up, I'm going to be discussing Averly Bradley and his decision to sit out or opt out of the NBA season in Orlando. So he has opted out of Orlando. I'm also going to be discussing the Knicks and their head coaching job, the 76ers, what I think they need to be doing going forward, and then make sure you stick around to the very end of the show because then I will be giving you guys my NBA All-Decade Awards, okay? So you don't want to miss that. Make sure you stick around to the very end of the show. But like I said, let's start talking about the most recent news to be released. And that at least, in my opinion, the most important news right now as well. It's going to be Averly Bradley and his decision to opt out of the NBA season in Orlando, Florida. He's one of the, in my opinion, he probably is the biggest name so far to opt out. There hasn't been too many guys. Him and Trevor Ariza and maybe Davis Bertans, I think, from Washington. But Averly Bradley, a guy a lot of us know, he's played very well for the Lakers this year, and he has officially opted out. It will not be going to Orlando with the Los Angeles Lakers to compete for a championship. So the reports say he's not just sitting out. He is obviously, him and Kyrie are the two lead men in the whole sit out. NBA players can just sit out, with what's going on in our country right now as far as civil rights. And rightfully so, but those guys were the two guys leading the charge. And like I said on my last podcast, or my last episode, Averly Bradley is probably going to see, or is a guy we're probably not going to see play in Orlando. And he came out and confirmed that for everybody, and is trying to give the Lakers as much time as possible to fill that spot. And it is a decent, at least decently sized hole to fill for that team. But like I said, he's not just sitting out for the civil rights movement. He's also sitting out because his son is reportedly, has had trouble in the past getting over respiratory illnesses, and he's at a higher risk, or most likely is at a higher risk to develop the virus than any other person. So in his opinion, very rightfully so, and Averly doesn't think it's safe to play. He released a statement saying, the whole reason he plays basketball is for his family, and what's the point to go play basketball if it might, in fact, put his family in danger. So, kudos to him. He's making the right move, I think, for his family. I think, like I said, I think the Lakers are going to miss him and his veteran presence. But I'm happy Averly Bradley came out, was a man and said, I'm sitting out. He's sticking to his guns, and I respect that. I got lots of respect for Averly, and for what he's done for in the NBA and what he's doing now. But let's talk about his role on the Lakers and maybe a couple of guys or a guy. There seems to be one guy kind of leading the whole thing, but let's break it down. This season for the Lakers alone, he's averaging about 8.5 points, about 2.5 rebounds, also grabbing a steal for the Lakers. The biggest drop off that this is going to cause for the Los Angeles Lakers is going to be on the defensive end of the court. When you have LeBron James and Anthony Davis, the two focal points of the offense, rightfully so. Averly Bradley obviously only averaging about 8 points, not a huge part of that offense. Not to trash, what he's done this season, because he's been a big part of the what they've done this year. He's been playing in, most games. There was a stretch of, I think, 10 games that he was out. But for the most part, he's been playing and starting for the Lakers, and like I said, is a part of their success. Should get some of the credit for their success, definitely. He walked in and stepped up right away and impacted their play right away, it seemed like. But like I said, this is gonna affect their defense more than the offense. In my opinion, he's the best guard, wing defender on the Lakers. Obviously, LeBron can guard 1 through 4, 1 through 5. Anthony Davis is a good defender, but as far as at that point guard and guard position, it's no doubt that Averly Bradley was their best defender and would take the best guard on the other team. So if they're playing the Warriors, Averly Bradley is most likely going to guard Steph, okay? Or he's going to have to guard Clay. Both difficult guys to guard, but he would be the guy guarding them. So yeah, he's the best guard defender on their team. Offense won't be missing him too much. But we did see him against the Clippers this year. We saw him drop 24 points. Let me see. I got his stat sheet. Yeah, he had 24 points, 2 steals, and a whopping 6 3-pointers against the Clippers, which, in some people's opinion, is what put them over the hump. Yes, if you've been listening to me over the past couple of weeks, I've said to you, the Lakers, the one thing they're really missing is that third option, that third guy. And Averly Bradley giving you 24 points is that third option, that third guy, potentially. Like I said, they had a number of guys who are potential, or who have the potential to be that number 3 guy on a given night. Obviously none of those guys are going to be the 3 guy every single night, but they had him, Averly Bradley, Kyle Kuzma, Danny Green. They had guys capable of being that third guy on a given night. Now they're losing one of those guys, okay? Because like I just talked about, games against the Clippers. I believe he had a very good game against the Rockets earlier this year. He's played well against a lot of the good teams they've played. Usually he's shown up and played some solid defense, grabbed a couple steals, and, he's made some shots. So yes, he will be missed, him and his veteran presence, for sure. I definitely think in the playoffs he was destined. He was going to be that third option on one of those given nights, and like I said, that will swing the momentum. That will change the favor in a game. You know what I mean? Going to that team. If it's simply LeBron and AD going, and once they go to the bench, no one else can turn it on, or even if LeBron and AD are having an off night, they're going to need a guy who can go and score a few buckets potentially. Not a guy you can always rely on, obviously, but we saw him last year. He was still averaging 16, 17 points in Memphis, being one of the focal points of their offense. So it's still there. He still has the talent. However, obviously this year wasn't the biggest part of their offense. And as far as who they might bring in, my number 1 guy is the best player right now. As far as youngest, I really like Tyler Johnson a lot. We saw Brooklyn kind of sweep him up and take him for their playoff push, or they're going to make the playoffs most likely. But they added him for some more scoring potentially off the bench. I really like Tyler Johnson. However, kind of lacking the veteran savviness that you kind of need right now just to be able to come in and play right away in the playoffs. Don't necessarily think he can come into a new system right away. That's why a guy like J.R. Smith, the guy apparently, according to Woj, is the front runner for the Lakers to sign right now. to replace Averly Bradley. So I do think that was the only knock on Tyler Johnson, not having as much of the veteran experience, been there, done that. We've seen JR in multiple finals now with LeBron. So I don't think, despite what I said, on my last episode, I don't think JR is a terrible option. In fact, I think he's a pretty good option. He's one of the better ones they have right now when you take everything into consideration, but there aren't just pros to, this JR signing. There are some cons and there are some worries, The first one is that, man, I got something in my throat. The first one is that JR has not played in basically 2 years now in the NBA. The last game he played was in November, the year after they lost to the Warriors in the finals after LeBron went to the Lakers. JR stayed with the Cavs basically for a month and then quit showing up, and they ended up releasing him. So JR hasn't played since November of 2018. The last notable game that he played in was the 2018 finals. So June of 2018. So exactly 2 years from now. 2 years ago from now. So that's a little bit concerning. What is his shape like? What's the stamina looking like? Can he go play 20 minutes in the NBA? I know he's, like I said, one of the pros is he's a veteran in this league and has been there and done that with the guy LeBron he would be doing it again with. So that's one of the biggest pros. But again, what shape is he in? Hasn't played in 2 years. We've seen videos of him working out and shooting threes, and he's knocking them down, Yeah, we know he's still got that 3-point, shooting ability that we know that hasn't gone anywhere. Is he going to be able to come in and play high minutes, potentially in the playoffs and finals, and, show up and be able to not mess up the game for you, like we did see him, basically lose the game for the Cavaliers in Game 1 of the 2018 finals. That's the biggest concern I have with him. Is he 100% focused? However, he has been away for 2 years. He hasn't been playing, hasn't been signed. I know, the thrive, the want to play is still there. So the incentive is there for him to go out and do the best he can, obviously. And I bet he's going to be focused and ready to play, but that's another concern, Is he focused? Is he ready to play? Is he going to watch the scoreboard at all times and make sure the score isn't tied before he dribbles the ball out? I don't know. I don't know if he's going to do that. Is that a lot to ask? I don't think so, but it could be with JR. But there are. Let's talk about some more pros with JR. Okay, talk about some more pros. He's a veteran scorer, as I talked about. I do think his offense will be able to translate somewhat right away. Because he's played with LeBron before, knows what LeBron likes. He knows simply to kind of hang out at that 3-point line. LeBron's going to drive and be able to kick it out. And he knows now there's a LeBron James and Anthony Davis taking more pressure away at the 3-point arc. So JR will be open more than we saw him, especially in that last couple of runs with Cleveland. But a career 12-point score, also a career 37% from the 3-point line, almost a 40%. Granted, not quite almost, but 37% from the 3-point line is pretty freaking good. And yeah, I do think he's going to be able to come right to the Lakers if they end up signing him. Whatever Woj tweets and says, I kind of take that to the bank. He's kind of the most reliable, in my opinion, obviously. He's one of the more reliable NBA sports analysts out there, and I don't necessarily believe it. I don't always believe it until I see Woj say it. So I see Woj saying, J.R. Smith is looking like the guy they're going to be signing, and I believe him. I do think as of, for the guys out there right now, he probably is the best choice. You don't want an Isaiah Thomas, a liability on defense. A Jamal Crawford, also not known for his offense, but the Laker group especially will be needing, more help on the defense, losing Averly, like I said, a defensive anchor for the team. So JR, we've seen him playing finals. We've seen him guard Steph and Clay well in those finals for the most part. We've seen Steph not win a finals MVP, Clay not win a finals MVP. I'm not saying JR shut them down by any means. No way, no how did he do that. But, we saw him play some quality defense at times, mess those guys up in a couple of games. And, I think he can come in, play well, some pretty good defense, guard one of the other team's better guards, if not the best guard on the other team. When I'm thinking about the other defenders, they have Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, pretty good. Him and JR, I think, are somewhat equal on the defensive end. Maybe since Kentavious has been playing, in the past 2 years, he might have the slight edge there because of stamina and, the game plan and such. But, JR is a veteran guy. I do think he's one of the better choices, if not the best choice right now for the Lakers to replace Averly Bradley. Obviously, he's not going to be starting right away or if at all. Caldwell-Pope is going to be slid up into that starting role. They obviously have Dion Waiters as well right now, so he's going to be that scorer off the bench as well. JR is simply there, kind of for some backup, and rightfully so. You might as well with those couple of extra roster spots like I was talking about on my last one. I'm all for the Lakers going for it and getting JR, pairing him up with his friend LeBron James, cause JR played some of his best basketball with LeBron, made some, like I said, made some really big shots, and, let's see if they get the deal finalized. I'm guessing they will, and, let's see the impact. But again, I do think their defense is gonna struggle a little bit. They still have the Defensive Player of the Year in Anthony Davis. LeBron's turned it up defensively. They still have a couple of key pieces. Like I said, Caldwell-Pope can defend. Kuzma can defend if he wants to. Kind of like the same thing as LeBron. Not a great defender, but it's an effort thing a lot of the time, and he isn't always putting in that effort. So they have other guys that need to step up defensively. I like the signing of JR potentially. And I'm just excited for more basketball. The more basketball news I get, the closer we get to the NBA returning, the better. And I'm guessing the more and more news we're going to get. June 24th. This airs on Thursday, so it'll be yesterday. Is the final day for players, I believe, to opt in or out. Again, correct me if I'm wrong, and I believe July 1st is the last day, is the deadline for teams to sign free agents until they head up to Orlando. So this upcoming week, we're going to get even more news, even more signings, I bet, and I'll be reporting on those as well. But coming in next after the break, let's discuss the New York Knicks and that head coaching position. I'll be right back.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines. They got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
All right, guys, welcome back. If you missed my last segment, make sure you go check that out. I'm talking about Averly Bradley, how he decided to opt out, how the Lakers are deciding or possibly deciding to sign J.R. Smith. So if you missed that, go check that out. But like I said before the break, I want to talk about the New York Knicks and that looming head coaching position, because I feel like over the past, I think, week or so, if not 2 weeks, it's been highlighted. It's been in the news more recently. The New York Knicks are looking for their next head coach. They're interviewing, I've seen them interview a handful of guys by now. They're thinking about interviewing the Warriors head coach, assistant coach. I know a couple of guys are also in the mix of there, so I'm going to break that down, talk about a couple of guys that are planning on interviewing who I think is probably the best choice for the job. But let's start out by just talking about the Knicks, okay? A team that obviously has not been in contention for years, if not a half decade, have not been in contention. They haven't really been relevant since the Carmelo trade, and they haven't been relevant since the Porzingis trade, which a lot of fans were not the biggest fan of. But obviously Porzingis wanted out, and that was the best, obviously, maybe for their franchise to get that maybe sour apple out of the patch. But, they got a couple of young guys from that Porzingis trade. Obviously Melo also simply wanted out in New York. That kind of seems to be the trend with the New York Knicks. And that can be a little scary as well, when a lot of the stars, all the best players, after a couple of years seem to demand out. It hasn't just been one, it's been a few now, and it is somewhat of a reoccurring pattern maybe, and that's not a reputation you want your team having, especially not the New York Knicks, one of the biggest names in basketball. So we know who the Knicks are. We know they're simply a young rebuilding team looking to get back to those Ewing days, those primetime Melo days. But haven't been there in a while, and haven't really been too relevant in a while. Sorry, Knicks fans. But I'm not a hater on the Knicks. I like the Knicks. I loved Carmelo when he was on there. That, like I said, that was the last time, in my opinion, they were really relevant, was when they had Carmelo in his heyday. So no hate on the New York Knicks for the little Knicks fans out there. There's no hate. But let's talk about where they kind of are now, okay? So more recently, in the past year, they hired Coach Fizdale, the coach from the Memphis Grizzlies prior. Did a great job with Memphis, getting them to the playoffs many times. Was a Miami Heat assistant coach during the LeBron days in Miami. So he's been around, and he's won championships, and he's coached teams and gotten to the playoffs, and he has a decent track record as a head coach. However, we see a bumpy start at the beginning of his career with the Knicks. No matter what, though, we all knew what that roster was before the season. None of us expected them to be close to playoff contention, maybe except for the people in the front office of the Knicks. I hope they weren't hoping for that. Maybe they had too high of expectations for this group at the beginning of the year. But if Fizdale starts off not too well, with a very negative record, only a couple of wins, they get rid of him. Not even a fourth of the way through the season, maybe a fourth of the way through the season. Right away, Mike Miller, the head at time assistant coach to Fizdale, in credit to Fizdale. He wouldn't have been there if not for him, but then Mike Miller gets promoted to the interim head coach. He does a pretty good job with what he has. As far as I read up on what some local New York stations think about him, and they don't dislike Mike Miller. They do not dislike him. However, they don't love him. I think they saw a slight upgrade to Fizdale as far as lineups and people knowing their roles. So it seemed a little bit better in the building. Everyone seemed to know their job and know what they were showing up for every day, which is a much better environment than showing up and not knowing your role, not knowing what you're going to do or play that day. Yeah, I see the difference there. I see how that could be a better environment for the players. However, that was him being promoted to be head coach and being the assistant coach on the Knicks is actually his first job in the league, in the NBA. He's been in the G League, he's been overseas, I believe. However, this is his first big break into the NBA. Not that that's bad. Maybe the Knicks need a new guy, no one with necessarily bad habits, but this is a somewhat older guy. So what you see is kind of what you get. We're most likely not going to see too much change in Mike Miller's system. Like I said, that isn't necessarily a bad thing to not have a talented roster this year whatsoever. So I think no matter who was the head coach this year, honestly, we wouldn't have seen much of a better outcome for the New York Knicks. But this is his first job in the NBA. Not a huge splash name, especially for the New York Knicks, a franchise that usually needs those big names. That's why they had the Carmelo, and they had the Mike D'Antoni, Jeff Van Gundy. They've had big names, Patrick Ewing. However, we saw these fans boo when they drafted Porzingis because it wasn't a big enough name for that big franchise. The Big Apple, the city, and they like it big. They like their stars, and usually Madison Square Garden. The Knicks fans go there to see the opposing stars because not always do they have the stars, but they love them there in Madison Square Garden. They might even end up chanting for the other team because they love the stars so much. So a city that needs stars and loves stars, and Mike Miller, just not a star, not a big name, I don't think the right name for the New York Knicks, at least at the head coach position. If you like him at the assistant, the new guy likes him as well. I don't see anything wrong with keeping him on the staff. But as far as being the head coach, I don't think that'd be the best idea for the Knicks going forward. Let's talk about a couple of potential options. At least other bigger names that have been thrown out there. Number one, Tom Thibodeau, known for his stunt with the Bulls, also more recently with the Timberwolves. We saw how that panned out, him getting fired as president and as coach. So that did not pan out the way he was hoping for. That roster did not pan out. We saw them really underplay. A lot of potential on that team. Never quite got up to the full potential that we all saw in them, I think. And I think that did have to do with the coaching in Tom Thibodeau. A limited guy. I think that we've seen the best of him, at least in Chicago. I think that was, in my opinion, again, a lot of people have said, I've read a story. I can't quote, I don't quite remember who wrote it, but, I saw something about, he said he's changed a whole lot. He's developed. He's learned a whole bunch since getting fired, and he's ready to come back and be better, basically, is what I saw. Kind of like a Mike McCarthy thing. With the Cowboys, getting fired from Green Bay and such. But I don't really see that. I do think that what you see is what you get. What we've seen is what we're going to get going forward. I think him not panning out in Minnesota really was detrimental to him and his reputation in the league. And again, I don't want to say he's a bad reputation as far as his ceiling, okay? I don't think his ceiling is as high as we thought it could be prior. I think the best we saw was with that Derrick Rose Bulls team. But however, a big name, he once was in New York prior then, he as an assistant coach, I believe, before he got his big break in Chicago. So a guy who's been in New York before. So he knows the city, knows the fan base, knows what's going on. So, and is a big name that the fans, might appreciate, might like more than, a guy like Mike Miller. So, Tom Thibodeau, probably the biggest name out there still. So if they are strictly going by big name, wanting to, make a big press release, we got Tom Thibodeau back. Maybe that's the way they go since they are the Knicks. They like being in the headline, they like stars. So maybe that's the way they go, but I would prefer them going on a route like a Kenny Atkinson, a guy we just saw get fired from the Brooklyn Nets for no apparent reason. We saw him make the playoffs last year, surprisingly with an a team in Brooklyn that no one saw making the playoffs. Okay, that's the best way to say it. No one saw that Brooklyn team making it to the playoffs. They won a game against Philly that first round last year, led by a young star in D'Angelo Russell. Kenny Atkinson, a big player development guy. Like I said, we saw it with D'Angelo. We saw it with all the young guys, Dinwiddie, Levert, a bunch of guys in Brooklyn. Allen, we've seen a lot of guys play a whole lot better since when they first got there. They've seen to be a playoff team this year with Kyrie mainly out of the lineup and no KD whatsoever. We still see them making the playoffs. I think that's a testament to Kenny Atkinson and his coaching, what he's done. And I didn't agree with Brooklyn firing him. I thought at least you should give him a stunt with Brooklyn with the 2 stars you just signed. I think it had to do with KD and Kyrie, maybe possibly wanting a Ty Lue, a different guy to come in and coach him. But still, Kenny Atkinson, I think wrongfully gets fired from Brooklyn, and a very big player, developmental guy, a young player. He loves working with young guys, and New York Knicks. When I say that, what comes to mind? Young, rebuilding. Why not go with a guy like Kenny Atkinson at least for a year, see how he does, see if he can at least start to develop these guys like RJ. Let's talk about these guys, these young guys on the New York Knicks a little bit. I'm almost running out of time on this, but let's talk about it a little bit. They have a guy like RJ Barrett. He's averaging 14, 15 points as a rookie, 5 rebounds. Again, with the mess in New York right now, you can't necessarily blame him for not thriving in that system, in that place. A guy like Mike Miller, also an unproven coach, not sure what his offensive game plan looked like, so you can't really blame RJ for only averaging 14, 15 points as a rookie, which also isn't bad. So he's still averaging. You could put it the other way. He's still averaging in that system 14, 15 points. Then you have a guy like Julius Randle, the best player arguably right now on the Knicks, the most proven player right now. 19 points, 10 rebounds a night. We saw him leaving LA for the big contract in New York. And he's one of their better players right now for sure. Still needs some development. Not as much as these other guys, since he is already averaging 20 and 10. You simply need him to keep that going, maybe bump it up to 20 and 10, but still not necessarily a guy you need to develop. So that's a pro. You already have a guy like Julius Randle, a guy who can come in and play. Need to develop RJ a bit more. Need to develop Mitchell Robinson, a young guy, I believe in his second year in the league right now, averaging 10 points, 7 rebounds. As a center in the league, 10 points, 7 rebounds. As a young guy, kind of a skinnier guy, not a big post threat, a very tall and lengthy guy, but not like a Shaq dominant, you know what I mean? Not a guy who can just bang down low, really. And he's still getting 10 and 7, so in New York, playing with Julius Randle as well. So he's playing well, 10 and 7. Need a little more from him, similar to a Jared Allen in Brooklyn. So I see Kenny coming in, being able to develop him as well. A guy like Kevin Knox, who people had high hopes for. However, this year, he's only averaging 6 points. Not playing too much as well. So he's really kind of taken a step back from his rookie year. Again, it could be from the whole mess in New York. Don't want to blame him solely, but a guy that needs some development. And again, Kenny Atkinson, a guy known for that. And then also a young point guard in Dennis Smith Jr., who I think still has, he's not an older player by any means, but he still has to prove that, he is a point guard in this league, and I think he is. Maybe not always a starter, but in New York, why not give him that role and see what he can do with it. We saw him do well in Dallas before he was traded for Porzingis. And I don't know why he's such a small role in that organization, but nonetheless, still a guy that needs developing. Not a guy who can just go in and score a whole bunch right away, but needs development. Is a young player, has a whole lot of potential, and in my opinion, like I've said, a guy like Kenny Atkinson would be the best choice. Don't know why he was fired in the first place from Brooklyn. But why not leave Brooklyn and go to, right down the road to the New York Knicks, maybe prove to them that they made a mistake, turn that young roster around. Well, I think that would be great for Kenny, and I think he is honestly, in my opinion, like I said, one of the better choices, for that position right now. But who knows with the Knicks, maybe they'll go with a big name in Tom Thibodeau. Who knows what they're gonna do, but we all can agree that they need to do something fast. They need to get back in contention. It's been kind of too long since they have been. We're not just going to keep letting them ride on the past like we did the Lakers those years. where they were down, but the Knicks have been down for a while now, and we can't just keep bailing them out. They're gonna have to play better and impress us again, and I'm excited to see what they have going forward, but also a little worried. I know they just hired a new guy in their front office who I haven't heard too much about it yet. I haven't seen a lot of people's opinions on it. I don't know too much about him, so I'm not really going to speak on it. But the Knicks just hired someone new. Maybe he has a guy in mind, and that's why they hired him. Who knows? No matter what, Knicks need to get their stuff together going forward because basketball is better when the Knicks are better. I think we all know that. But I'm going to go ahead and take a break. When I come back, I want to talk about those Philadelphia 76ers, okay? That's all I'm going to tell you for now. Stick around. I'll be right back.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA, from the UFC to extreme cage fighting. They got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
All right, guys, welcome back. Like I said before the break, I want to talk about the Philadelphia 76ers. I haven't really told you what I want to discuss about them, however. So we know the 76ers, led by their two stars in Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons. We know who they are. We know their games. Let's start by talking about Ben. Ben, this season, is averaging 17 points, 8 assists, and 8 rebounds. Joel Embiid, 23 points, 12 rebounds, 1 block. He's also shooting 34% from the three-point arc, so a big guy, 7-footer, who can stretch the court to the three-point line. Doesn't always have to be down low. However, that's kind of where he thrives. Some people really like to knock him because he spends too much time on the perimeter when he is such a dominant post force presence. We've seen Joel take a step back this year. He was averaging more points last year, about the same rebounds. I expected him at least to take a big step up. Having them lose to Toronto the way they did, I did kind of expect a little more from him this year. Nonetheless, he's played very well. 23, 12, and 1 block. That's very good. Best center in the league right now, arguably. However, the Philadelphia 76ers, despite having these two guys, these two stars, they are all stars. They are 39 and 26, which is 6th. They are 6th in the Eastern Conference. They are 6th, despite, I don't want to just, talk crap right now. They have had injuries to, obviously we know Joel Embiid. I've talked about it before. The biggest knock on him is he going to be playing? So he's been in and out, obviously, and then Ben Simmons has also had his fair share of injuries, so he's been in and out the lineup as well. And then we know what they do with their roster. Losing a whole lot of offense, and Jimmy Butler, J.J. Redick, a couple of other notable players. But those are the two main guys that they lost in free agency. So they lost a lot of offense, haven't necessarily seen a step up from both of their stars. So that is kind of why they are sitting at 6th in the Eastern Conference. But when you have two All-Stars on your team and you're in the Eastern Conference and you're still at 6th in the conference, something isn't necessarily working to the maximum. Isn't going to its max potential, at least right now. I don't think 6th in the East by any means is anybody's standard of very good, especially when you have those two type of players. But, the biggest question with those two guys, besides injuries, which is the biggest question, but besides injuries, the other biggest question has got to be, do they play well together? Their games, I don't want to say they're very similar, but, where they like to go, their points on the court where they like to, their spots are similar. Joel Embiid, like I said, an ultimate post presence, biggest post presence in the league today. And then there's a guy like Ben Simmons who, I've talked about it before, is not an outside jump shooter by any means. Not a guy known for his outside jump shooting. The biggest flaw in his game right now, I believe he's made one career 3-point shot. Has attempted a handful, but has literally made one 3-point shot in his 2 to 3 years in the league now. Which is very disappointing, which is obviously much less than his co-star in Joel Embiid. That's why we kind of see Joel need to spread the floor and hang out outside more often than not, because their point guard and Ben Simmons can't shoot that outside jumper and thrives driving to the paint, kind of kicking out to an outside jump shooter or driving to the paint and making a play himself. You can't necessarily do that when you have Al Horford and Joel Embiid clogging up the paint for you. So that is my biggest concern with those two players, besides injuries, on the court. That's my biggest concern. Chemistry, can they play together at a high level, and can it translate to a championship? So we know Joel come out and said he wants to win an MVP. Ben said, I know. That's also another worry of mine. Are they a little too worried about individual statistics and awards rather than that team finals? So another concern of mine, but we've seen Ben play. We've seen Ben without Joel. Okay, we've also seen Joel without Ben. More, though, we've seen Ben without Joel Embiid. And it's no argument, it's facts that his stats go up when Joel is not playing. His points, 17 points, go up to 19 points. His field goal percentage goes up to 59, almost 60% from the field. Again, he's shooting a lot of close shots, but they're a lot easier since he doesn't have Joel clogging up the paint, having the other center down there with him. He's also averaging, instead of 7 assists or 7 rebounds, he's up to 8.7, so basically 9 rebounds, so about basically 2 extra rebounds a night. And then he's also getting, one thing that went down was the assists. He lost 1 assist, but that's because he's doing a little bit less playmaking, more scoring, more rebounding, and we saw him playing very well when Joel went down. Not as much when just Joel is out there. He's playing well. His scoring will go up. Not as much as the team success. They kind of need a point guard who can run the offense in Ben. But I'm not debating who's the better player here. Who's better without who. The facts are that Ben Simmons plays a little bit better when Joel Embiid's not on the floor. But despite that, I don't think it's time to hit the panic button, blow up this big thing, because they do have 2 young stars. Maybe they don't have the right coach, and maybe they're not playing in the correct system. That's a whole nother thing. We know what coaching can do. We saw Steve Kerr show up to Golden State. They win a championship right away. So we know the effect coaching has in basketball. Maybe that's the 76ers issue. However, I do like Brett Brown. I think he's a pretty good coach. However, there are better guys out there, and you can't blame the players always. When you have those stars, you kind of have to try out another coach before, shipping those guys out of town. So that's what I would do. I would give it one more year. If they are healthy in this postseason, they've been in and out of the lineup all year. I hope they're healthy all the way. If we see a big push from them this year, obviously they're gonna keep it for a whole nother year. But if we see a first round exit because they play Boston first round or something like that, if we see that, you gotta start thinking, do these guys play well together? I know with their roster, how it's set up right now, they can't necessarily go add another piece to their roster, to their game. Can't add another score. So what I would do is, I give it one more year. I let Joel and Ben hash it out for another year. And then I either trade Ben or Joel Embiid. I would love to hear your guys' opinions on this. But you gotta trade one of them. They need shooters. Okay, that's the biggest thing they're lacking. Losing J.J. Redick and Jimmy Butler and Marco Bellinelli. There are other sharpshooters they have lost. So shooting is the biggest. I think Landry Shamet was on there as well. So they've lost 3-point shooting. However, they don't have the 3-point shooting, and the paint is as clogged as ever. But like I said, they don't have the cap space right now to just go out and sign a scorer. So they're going to have to make it through trade. They need a shooting guard or maybe even another point guard who is more of a shooting guard, who can spread the floor for Ben, give him some more room down low so we can kick out to a shooter outside. Again, the thing they're lacking right now. But like I said, their cap space is tied up to basically 4 guys: Joel Embiid, Ben Simmons, Tobias Harris, Al Horford. Those last 2 guys, in my opinion, not deserving of the max money that they got from the 76ers, especially Al Horford, who I think is on the way out of his career on the back end. The fact that they gave him, that whopping contract, despite already having an elite center, not necessarily needing him, honestly just getting him away from Boston, because when you saw Horford play Philly, he seemed to have their card and outplay them almost every time. But yeah, their cap space is filled up by those 4 guys. They're going to have to unload one of the big ones. And the biggest name, the guy you can get the most for to help your team, despite him being a huge transcendent talent, despite him being probably the best player on your team, is Joel Embiid. And you most likely have to trade Joel Embiid because, like I said, you're going to be able to get a haul for that guy. The most bang for your buck will be Joel Embiid. Despite his injury worry, everyone in the league knows who he is and what he brings. And, it's going to have to be through trade. I wouldn't trade Simmons. I don't think there's as big a market for Simmons as there is for Embiid. Simmons is also a point guard, a ball handler. Late in games, I want a guy who has the ball in his hand, rather than a guy you have to dump it to down low. Not saying, but we see the NBA going away from the center more than ever. So I would trade Joel Embiid, get the most from him since he is arguably the best center in the league. I'd get a haul from him. As far as what you could get, you could speculate. Obviously, a guy like Bradley Beal and a few first-round picks and maybe Davis Bertans would be a fantastic trade, I think, for both sides. But still, really depends on the next year and a half, see what they can do. Maybe you find a new coach, but I don't think it's for debate that the Sixers aren't playing up to their full potential. I don't know if it's because of their stars, because of their coach, but they need to figure it out, and I think I give them about a year to do so until you kind of not blow it up, but you change the scenery, you make a change to your team, and I think it's going to have to happen within the next year if we don't see a playoff finals push. But yeah, I like the Sixers a lot. People in my family, I have some family from Pennsylvania, so I have some family that are some, diehard Sixers fans, so I respect it. I love their stars. Just don't know how much I love them together. But again, they got something to prove. Maybe, hopefully they come back healthy, can make a splash in the East, maybe make an upset over Boston. That would be great. But I'm going to go ahead and take a quick break. When I get back, like I said at the beginning of the show, I want to talk about my all-decade NBA awards. So don't go anywhere. I'll be right back.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts, past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
All right, guys, welcome back. GSMC Basketball Podcast. This is my final segment of the day. Like I've been saying, I want to end it by talking about my all-decade NBA awards. Bleacher Report came out a little while ago and released theirs. I really like the idea of all-decade awards. I think it's really interesting. So I thought I'd go ahead and give you guys my all-decade awards. Bleacher Report released their 2010, so this is from 2010 to 2020. MVP, who was the decade MVP? Let's start out with that. The biggest award, the biggest accomplishment would be MVP of the decade, and I don't think it's really up for debate. Over the past 10 years, LeBron James has 3 championships, he has 3 finals, and in the last 10 years, he has 3 MVPs. That one MVP was right before 2010. So he has 3 MVPs, 3 finals, and 3 finals MVPs. He's been all NBA basically every year besides that off year, his first year in LA. He's been all defensive team. He's went to 8 straight finals. I don't think it's really up for debate that there's another MVP of this decade. You could try to talk. I'm trying to think of another one. Maybe, Kobe though. Kobe retired in 2016, so he couldn't be it. Kevin Durant, he's been playing at a high level. But he has 1 MVP and 2 championships and 2 finals MVPs to LeBron's 3 and 3. LeBron's scored more points, has made more finals appearances. He's my MVP for the decade, and if you can find another MVP for the decade, I would love to hear it. Maybe you could try to say Steph, but Steph really wasn't around at the beginning of the 2010s. Really started making his move in 2013, so that's still 3 years. LeBron was doing it the entire decade. LeBron is my all-decade MVP. All right, next up will be the team. Who is the team of the decade? Let's think. Who won the team? 3 championships in 5 years in this decade. They won 3 and 5. They went to 5 straight. They had 3 of the best players in the league, 2 MVPs. I'm talking about the Golden State Warriors, if you haven't already realized. Golden State Warriors are my team of the decade. Like I said, they've won 3 championships in 5 years. They've been in contention for half of the decade. They have multiple MVPs on their teams in Steph Curry and Kevin Durant. They have the best backcourt, arguably, in history in Steph Curry and Klay Thompson. They have the 2 best shooters, arguably, ever in Steph Curry and Klay Thompson. They have one of the better coaches in the league today in Steve Kerr. And like I said, they've been in contention for half of the decade. From 2015 to 2020, they were in the finals. So they have got to be the team of the decade. You could say LeBron, but cause he's almost his own team, but he's moved around, Cleveland, Miami, now LA. So if he was on maybe one team that entire decade and they won all 3 or 4, I got to give it to that. But he's been bouncing around. He's my MVP, but my team of the decade has got to be the Golden State Warriors for what they've done. And I think they solidified themselves as an all-time great team. Especially in 2017, despite in 2015 or in 2016, them, going 73-9, being the best regular season team ever, them blowing that 3-1 lead to Cleveland really, brought them down in a lot of people's opinions on the all-time great team. Then they go ahead and add a 2-time MVP, or an MVP in Kevin Durant. And, they solidify themselves and then become an all-time great team, 4 All-Stars on one team, 2 MVPs. I don't know if that's the first time 2 MVPs have ever played together. Probably not, but at least in their primes, it's got to be one of the only times 2 MVPs have played together. And, in my opinion, one of the best teams of all time. Golden State Warriors are my team of the decade. Let's move on. My series of the decade, and, arguably, the hardest series to watch, the most cringy and one of the coolest series to watch at the same time has got to be the 2016 finals with, LeBron and the Cavs, Steph and the Warriors. The Warriors go up 3-1. Everyone expects them to make quick work of LeBron for a second time. Not so fast. LeBron and Kyrie, Kevin Love make a come back from 3-1. The first time in NBA history, okay? The first time in NBA history any team has come back from 3-1 in the NBA Finals. So a huge credit to him, LeBron and the Cavaliers for beating that team. And if you watch that, the first 4 games of the series, it was clear that Golden State was the favorite and the front runner for the series. And then, we saw Draymond Green get suspended, LeBron take it to a whole nother level. Kyrie take it to a whole nother level. They come back, beat arguably at that time a team people were calling already the best team in NBA history. LeBron goes and beats them in historic fashion. The block, I'll save that. I'll save talking about the actual Game 7. But the 2016 NBA Finals, in my opinion, best playoff series in this past decade. It being historic, LeBron getting his third for Cleveland, being the 73-9 team, all, just thinking all the historical factors of it, it's got to be the best series of the decade. Best game of the decade, we're not going far. 2016 Game 7 of the NBA Finals. Like I said, finished the comeback. Kyrie's epic 3-point shot. LeBron's epic block on Andre Iguodala. Like I said, I say the block. For NBA fans, I'll say, the block. I'm talking about LeBron James blocking Andre Iguodala in Game 7 of the Finals. A lot of people say the shot, Kyrie hitting, in some people's opinions, the biggest shot in NBA Finals history. Game 7, it's on the line. He hits it to get your team up 4 points. So yes, Kyrie definitely hit one of the biggest shots in NBA history. LeBron makes one of the biggest blocks in NBA history. They then come back and make the biggest comeback in NBA history, beat arguably the best team in NBA history. So, yes, that has got to be the best game of the decade. At least that's the best game I've watched. They also threw up there, Klay's Game 6 against OKC, how he just went berserk and took that game over. That was an amazing game as well. I give the slight edge to the Game 7 as well, because, what's better than a Game 7? That's one of the best things in sports. So, Game 7 NBA Finals, my opinion, best game of the decade. The best shot of the decade. Like I was just talking about Kyrie, he made that big shot to beat the Warriors after LeBron's block. Detriment, huge for that team. They don't necessarily win unless he makes that shot. However, is the biggest shot of the decade or of NBA history? I gotta say no. I have to say no. And it's just because, that the game wasn't necessarily on the line. There was a minute or so left, or a couple minutes left. LeBron or him could have made another jump shot. They were still up in the game by 1 point, so no, I don't think it was necessarily the biggest shot of the decade. It was huge, obviously, but I gotta make the biggest shot of the decade, the best shot, Ray Allen, Game 6 of the 2013 NBA Finals. LeBron about to lose his third finals, I believe, after losing to the Mavericks a year before, or the 2 years prior after beating the OKC Thunder. They go and face the Spurs. It's Game 6. LeBron has the ball. There's about 10 seconds left. He chucks up a 3 because they are down by 3. Clanks off the rim. Chris Bosh grabs the rebound. You guys have heard it. Bosh gets the rebound out to Allen. Allen, 3-pointer. Good, if you're listening to this, I bet you're just, going over that memory in your head. That was the biggest shot I've ever seen. The clutchest shot I have ever seen. If he misses that shot, LeBron he loses another finals. He only has 2 championships, and his legacy is not the same. It is not, obviously, we don't talk about, prior to LeBron missing that 3 and Ray Allen making it, LeBron was just going berserk in the fourth quarter. So you have to give him props for that. But When the money was on the line, he missed it. Ray Allen made it, and what it did, making them force overtime, go and ended up beating the Spurs in 7 games, gets LeBron his second championship, and they go back to back, something not too many teams have done. And if you were just watching that game and that shot, you know how legendary that was. He didn't even look at the 3-point line. He had the feeling, grabbed the ball, stepped back, perfect swish. They go to overtime, win the game. Ray Allen, Game 6, NBA Finals, 2013, my shot of the decade. I'm running out of time here, but my biggest trade of the decade, it's got to be Harden to the Rockets. Ever since he's gotten to the Rockets, they've been in playoff contention. They've been in the playoffs. He's been the vital part of that team since the move was made. And like I said, they've known nothing but success since he got there. No championships, but that's about it. Multiple Western Conference Finals. He's won an MVP, been the scoring champ, assist champ. He's done it all in Houston. He's turned that franchise from what it was, a dreary, not necessarily people look forward to watching, into a very exciting, James Harden, he's one of the best scorers in the league today. So in my opinion, that was the biggest trade of the last decade, getting him to that franchise, rebooting the franchise. Now, obviously him being that face of the franchise, them being in contention since he got there, almost, not playing to his full potential, not being used to his full potential in OKC, goes there, immediately translates, become a star. Harden to the Rockets is my trade of the decade. The signing of the decade has got to be LeBron James to the Miami Heat. Now, I know what you're saying. How is it not Kevin Durant to the Golden State Warriors? I'll tell you why. LeBron James, or Kevin Durant, does not go to the Warriors if LeBron James does not go to the Miami Heat. Okay? LeBron going to Miami, going to South Beach, making the big 3 with Dwayne Wade and Chris Bosh, instrumental to his career and his legacy, what he did there, winning back-to-back championships. I know he lost 2 as well, but still made the big 3 with Dwayne Wade and Chris Bosh. And that was, in my opinion, the real beginning of player mobility and player movement and power to the players. You can play wherever you want. Play with whoever you want. LeBron made that possible, almost started to erase the stigma. Obviously, what KD did was a step up on that scale, joining a guy in Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, and Draymond Green. But still, LeBron set the blueprint for him, leaving, in free agency to join those guys, starting the player movement, changing free agency to this day. That has got to be the biggest signing, just because of all of the domino effects it had on the rest of the league. That's the biggest signing of the decade, in my opinion. And then last but not least, coach of the decade has got to go to Greg Popovich. He's the 2010-2011 Coach of the Year, 2013-2014 Coach of the Year, won the 2014 NBA Finals, has been to the final or the playoffs every year of this decade prior to this 2020 season, 2019-2020 season. We saw the passing of his wife. We've seen him go through some things in this past year. So I don't want to blame it on that, but I want to give him a little bit of a edge, or a little bit of, I want to give him some slack, okay? He made the playoffs from 2010 to 2019, okay? Not always with an elite roster. And half of that, yes, he had the Spurs dynasty, but at the tail end, he didn't have Tim Duncan. It was a Kawhi, made the trade for DeMar last year, still made the playoffs. He's got to be my coach of the year. He's been so consistently good in this league, has been consistently winning for the entire decade. There's no coach who's been doing it as consistently for the entire decade. He's got to be the coach of the year in everybody's mind. Going forward, in this next decade, let's see if he's still here. Let's see if he's still around in the NBA. I hope he is. In my opinion, he's one of the best coaches in the entire league, if not of all time. But Coach Popovich has got to be my coach of the decade. And again, if you guys like these awards, I'm happy, please give me some feedback. I would love to hear your opinions on the awards. If I messed something up or if I simply forgot something, maybe I forgot a big shot or a big game, please feel free to let me know. That's going to be it for Dudes Talking Sport, or for GSMC Basketball Podcast this week. I'm going to go ahead and sign off. But again, this next week is going to be huge for us and everybody at the GSMC Basketball Network. All the guys here who are going to be talking about all the sports, especially us here in basketball, though. Us in the basketball podcast, more than anybody, we're getting news, especially with the sign, the deadline being yesterday and the next deadline for free agents being next week. We're going to have a lot of news coming out within the next week. I'm super excited for it. I'm going to keep you guys posted. If you haven't already yet, I want to encourage you guys to go follow us on Twitter, Facebook, any social media you are on. Also, if you enjoyed today's podcast, please leave it a nice review. We'd really appreciate it here at GSMC. As always, thank you so much for listening, and I'll be right back here again next week.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Basketball Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.